This is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. My name is Andy Steele, and I am the host. Tonight, we're going to be joined by none other than Richard Gage, AIA, CEO and founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He's going to be joined also by Dan Barnum, FAIA. He's a board member here at AE. And our Director of Strategy and Development, Ted Walter. He's back, and we're all going to be discussing the World Trade Center 7 resolution, which is going to be voted on at this year's AIA convention in Orlando. We've submitted this resolution twice in the past, and we've seen the numbers grow. The votes for it have increased. The momentum is on our side. There's been some interesting developments in our outreach at the AIA, so we'll be touching upon that in the discussion this evening. So all of that is coming your way in just a moment. Stay tuned.
The views expressed on this show by guests and the host on issues outside of the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence are the opinions of those individuals alone and do not necessarily reflect those of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth.
Today I have the pleasure of being joined by three very dedicated people with AE 9/11 Truth. We're going to start with Ted Walter. He's the Director of Strategy and Development here. He's been involved in a number of 9/11 related campaigns, including the High Rise Safety Initiative and the Remember Building 7 campaign. He's also the lead author of Beyond Misinformation, What Science Says About the Destruction of World Trade Center Buildings 1, 2, and 7. That's a book that we reference a lot here on this program, and I see people passing it around all over the internet. So a great contribution to the movement. Dan Barnum is here. He's a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. He's from Houston, Texas. He holds a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Architecture degree from Rice University. Between those attainments, he served in the U.S. Navy on active duty in Vietnam, and he remained in the U.S. Naval Reserve until retiring as a commander in 1977. He practiced architecture for more than 50 years, designing a variety of buildings, from houses to high-rise office buildings, until he recently retired in 2015. He was also the lead sponsor on last year's AIA resolution. We'll be getting into all of that here in the interview. And last but not least, we have Richard Gage, AIA, San Francisco Bay Area architect of 28 years, member of the American Institute of Architects, and he is the founder and CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He's worked on most types of building construction, including numerous fireproof steel frame buildings. He knows the 9/11 evidence inside and out, dedicated for years, been all over the world talking about this issue, and of course founded the organization that we're all a part of. So we have a debt of gratitude to offer him. And we're going to be talking about this year's AIA resolution, a number of things, developments centered or revolving around it. But before we do that, we always keep in mind that we have new listeners coming onto the show all of the time, people who may not even be familiar with the issues surrounding the destruction of the three towers that fell in New York on September 11th. So I'm going to ask Richard to begin by giving our audience a little background on the issue and then about the resolution that we submit to the AIA each year. So Richard, you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Andy. I'm excited to be on 9/11 Freefall, and we got such a great listener base. These are folks that are following us keenly, and so many may already be aware that for the third year in a row, we are submitting a resolution to the American Institute of Architects at their annual business meeting at the convention this year in Orlando in April, late April, this coming month. And what are we hoping to accomplish? Well, we've found through our attendance at more than a dozen conventions of architects and engineers that most architects and engineers are completely unaware of the third worst structural failure in modern history, World Trade Center Building 7. And so this year, yet again, we're presenting to the whole body of 80,000 architects who are members of the American Institute of Architects. It's about a quarter of the architects in our country. And they're represented by about 400 people who will be voting on their behalf to approve or deny this resolution, which calls upon the AIA to call for a new investigation of this third tower's collapse on 9/11 in the afternoon. So here, for those who don't know about it, which includes most architects, so don't feel bad, that's why we spend so much time educating them. And when they see this building come down in the manner it does on the video at the conventions, they're just shocked to hear that the official story, the narrative, the building reports say that this building came down due to normal office fires. Now that's NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which 7 years later gives us this report, normal office fires. But when you look at it, you can clearly see it looks exactly like the old hotels in Las Vegas. It comes down uniformly, symmetrically, at free fall acceleration, straight down into its own footprint in the exact manner of a classic controlled demolition. And there are witnesses that hear those sounds of explosions. There's witnesses of molten iron, molten steel. They call it molten steel. It turns out to be molten iron. There's witnesses. In fact, there's documentation of the residue of thermite, an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. So we have iron microspheres, for instance, that are found in all the World Trade Center dust that are evidence only of liquid molten iron with a byproduct of thermite. The FEMA documents in Appendix C of their 2002 building report, the clear evidence of hot corrosion attack on the steel by sulfur and hot molten iron. Well, that can only be thermite, as we reveal in the evidence that's inside the resolution this year going to the AIA for a vote. So we're all excited.
Absolutely. It's an issue that has been around basically since 9/11 happened, really getting its legs under it when people started taking a breath in the aftermath of 9/11 and taking a look at the actual destruction of these buildings. A lot of people had never even heard of Building 7 before, as Richard mentioned in talking about architects. I'm talking about the overall population, and then just on the internet, just raw video of this building coming down, a lot of people's eyes were open, realizing just from just a common sense perspective that fire cannot do this to a steel frame high-rise. And if you've never heard of this issue before, if you've never seen Building 7 come down, please just type in Building 7 collapsing, something like that. Find a video about 10 seconds long with no commentary, no opinions. Just watch it for yourself and ask yourself, does it look like fire brought this building straight down symmetrically in the way that it did? And then right from there, start looking into the evidence, and you'll be very well educated on this and call for a new investigation. I'm confident. We've got the booklet, as I mentioned before, Beyond Misinformation, that really fills in a lot of the details in a really concise and compact way. So we've got the issue laid out for you. We've been trying to do everything that we can for the last 10 years to educate the public and wake up our government officials as well, and officials at large, important organizations like the AIA, on the need for this situation to be dealt with, particularly the case of Building 7, for a new investigation to happen. Ted, I'm going to turn to you right now because you've really been at the forefront of these AIA resolutions and actually came up with the idea of submitting the resolution a couple of years back. So can you go into our history with the AIA in this resolution and essentially, what got us to where we are today with this campaign?
Absolutely, Andy. So our history with the American Institute of Architects, really goes back a number of years, pretty much to the founding of the organization. Within a few years, after the organization was started, Richard and others started attending the national convention of the AIA every year and reaching out to architects, educating them about the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7, as well as the collapse of the two Twin Towers, and gathering more petition signers, growing the ranks of this organization, and to where we are now today, which is at 2,800 architects and engineers. Over the years, we, as an organization, started appealing to the leadership of the AIA to really take the issue seriously, and even put together a panel to investigate it, or do some kind of report and issue a report on whether a new investigation was needed. And a few years ago, the president at the time, this was in 2014, actually did put together a panel to review the evidence surrounding the collapse of all three buildings. And at the time, we were very hopeful that this panel, which was basically comprised of a few members of the national board, would really take a good look at the evidence, and that this might lead to the AIA actually taking a position on the World Trade Center collapses and calling for a new investigation. And I know that Richard and Dan were involved in the conversations with the leadership of the AIA at that time, trying to give them all the information, all the evidence surrounding the collapse of these buildings. They came back to us after not hearing from them for about 6 months, very early 2015, with a letter that basically said, your evidence just isn't strong enough, or just isn't clear cut enough, and we have no reason to distrust the official reports issued by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, as well as FEMA and the ASCE, et cetera, and essentially said, please go away. We really don't want to look at this anymore. We're all in agreement that this is not a serious issue. And at that point, and this was early 2015, we said, okay, well, how else can we make inroads with this organization that represents 80,000 architects throughout the U.S. and around the world as well? And we discovered that the organization had this process where members could submit, either members of the Institute or chapters or state organizations, the various local components throughout the country, could submit resolutions that the delegates representing their members would vote on. And we really, as we looked more into it, we found that there was an opportunity to really galvanize the membership, to call upon the leadership of the AIA to take this issue seriously and to officially support a new investigation into the collapse of Building 7. And because approaching the leadership had not worked, and at the same time we have been making progress every single year with members of the AIA when they come to our booth at these national conventions. And so we crafted a resolution 2 years ago, and we got enough sponsors. The requirement is to have at least 50 members of the AIA sponsoring the resolution. And we submitted this resolution, and we went to the convention in Atlanta 2 years ago in May. And it was a very heated debate, and we got about 4% of the vote in favor of the resolution. We, at that time, didn't know what to expect. I think we were disappointed that we came away with that small of a vote in favor of the resolution. But we also knew that we probably had done more in that year and through that resolution to make people look at this and really increase awareness of the collapse of Building 7 among the architects involved with the AIA. And so we said, okay, let's try this again. Let's see if we can make some progress here, because it wasn't a full success, obviously, but we definitely had some success with this. And so we actually redrafted the resolution last year for the 2016 convention. And the first resolution was a little simpler, a little more clean cut in a way. And so last year we redrafted the resolution so that it actually, as Richard mentioned, included all of the evidence, or what we consider to be the most important evidence indicating that Building 7 was brought down in a controlled demolition. And so the resolution is actually much longer, but it effectively acts as an educational document for all the delegates and all the members of the AIA out there who actually read the resolutions that are voted on each year. And then we also we managed to do a mailing to we basically went and found the mailing addresses of 2,500 local chapter leaders, board members, national board members, and tried to educate them about Building 7, about the resolution before the convention last year. And it ended up, as well as our efforts at the convention, having a booth, ended up, winning 11% of the vote. So we almost tripled the number of votes that we got at the business meeting last year. And so, yeah, we feel that, when that happened, we kind of regrouped and decided, debated or discussed whether we should go for a third year, and we decided that we should. And so here we are. We have just, a month ago submitted the resolution, and we found out, a couple weeks ago that the resolution was accepted once again. And we will be going to Orlando in a month to advocate for this resolution to be approved. And we're hoping to at least triple that vote share again. We got 11% last year. Can we bring this up to, 30% or 33% or a third of the members, or even more, maybe even win? Because we know that the evidence is on our side. And we also know that right when you kind of get past that 10% mark of kind of like public opinion or a new idea that you have very strong advocates that are trying to persuade the rest of the population of an idea, right when you cross that 10% mark is where you kind of hit a turning point, and then acceptance of that idea just kind of multiplies exponentially. And we hope that that's what we're seeing happen now with acceptance of the idea that Building 7 was brought down by controlled demolition and that we need to have a new investigation.
Yeah, these are how these things happen, and it's not like in a movie where you just do one action and everything turns around in 2 minutes and the credits roll. You have to keep on working at the institutions, at the system, keep on putting the evidence out there, and just be relentless. And we've had success by doing that in the past, and we're having success now. I mean, the numbers are getting bigger and bigger, larger and larger. More people are looking at the evidence with a rational eye and saying, yeah, you've got a point there. It should be looked at again. And that's always the position I take. I think it's the most conservative position and the most winning approach, and certainly we'll be taking that approach to the AIA this year. Dan, as a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, why is it so important that we do this outreach to the AIA? Why is it so important that we get the AIA to essentially agree with us on the need for a new investigation and look at Building 7 even further?
Well, when I first got involved in AE 9/11, I started doing some research, and one of the first things I did was I looked back through the national publication for AIA, which is a magazine called Architect, and then before that, a magazine called Progressive Architecture. And I realized that for all of these years, there has not been one word published about the collapse of the 3 World Trade Center towers, which to me seemed irresponsible. And so I thought we've got to do something about that, because clearly our organization is purposely turning a blind eye to something that should not be ignored. And so I said to myself, well, what can we do? And this turns out to be part of what I think we can do, is we can bring attention to the fact that this is a situation that the AIA has ignored, that it shouldn't be ignored, that a vast number of architects are not aware of Building 7. Of course, everybody's aware of the Twin Towers, but most people, even some of my very good friends who are architects here in Houston, when I talk to them about it, they say, "Oh yeah, those those towers fell because airplanes hit them. And I said, no, think about it. And they just they won't change their mind because their minds have been made up, and I shouldn't confuse them with the facts. So I think it's incumbent upon us to try to educate our organization, and then have our organization educate the general public. So that's what I think we're out there to do, and we just keep chipping away at it.
I agree, and it seems like something like this would be the most interesting event in the studies of any architect or engineer. I mean, when you strip away the tragedy and just look at the circumstances themselves, particularly in the case of World Trade Center 7, if your whole career has revolved around constructing buildings and figuring out what keeps them standing for hundreds of years after they're built, it seems like this would be interesting to the architects, especially the AIA. But instead, what we've seen a lot of is dismissing of the issue. People saying, we don't need to look at that. I've had one person say that to me. People coming up with make-believe explanations that have no basis in fact. It really surprises me as somebody who's not an architect or an engineer to speak to an architect and be told things like, oh, it was seismic activity that brought down World Trade Center 7, as if a earthquake just suddenly hit New York on the day of 9/11. That would be some pretty bad luck for the city of New York, let me tell you. But there's no basis in fact. It's just kind of throwing stuff out there. And there may be people listening, newcomers, who might be saying to themselves, okay, well, these guys have gone to the AIA. The AIA says they looked at it. They don't see anything there. So why aren't they simply going with that explanation from the AIA? Why aren't they trusting that judgment? And I think part of understanding why we don't is, first of all, understanding the evidence laid out in Beyond Misinformation and other DVDs by AE 9/11 Truth, but also listening to the arguments of some of our detractors, particularly at the business meeting. Richard, I'm going to have you field this one. What have been some of the arguments that have been raised at previous business meetings when they discussed the resolution against us? What are some of the points and arguments that they've made, and why are they wrong?
Well, one thing they said is that we've looked at this, we've reported on it, we've had discussions, we've had conferences, but nowhere on the AIA website can you find any evidence of any official communication from the AIA to its members about World Trade Center Building 7. There was a draft report put out in 2008. The final report came out, issued by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and there was no response whatsoever from the Association of 80,000 Architects, the premier association in the world for high-rise architects and all architects, and not even a response to this 7-year study costing many millions of dollars. There's nothing on it. So we've been actually lied to by the vice president at the time of the AIA, Mr. Frank Pitts, who also leveled accusations which bear no merit, calling us conspiracy theorists, when all we're doing is presenting the scientific evidence that has caused now, by vote in the annual business meeting of, Ted mentioned, 12% of the vote. That's more than 9,000 architects who are represented here. And of course, 2,800 signed on to our petition, architects and engineers all around the world, demanding a new investigation based on not theories, but evidence, eyewitness testimony, video testimony, the evidence that we've included in this year's resolution. It is overwhelming. So we think that they're coming at us in these debates at the annual business meeting from a position of fear rather than a direct, square confrontation with what we're actually saying. So it's mostly names. Perhaps Dan or Ted could add to the concerns we get unfounded concerns we get from the board members at these debates.
Yeah, Ted,
one of the
go
things
ahead.
that came up at the first convention where we had a resolution was they thought we were asking that AIA do the investigation, which of course was not what we were asking. We were asking only that they join us in asking for a new investigation. Wholly different question. So that was just another way of obfuscating the question.
Absolutely, and I remember watching some video of the first year that we did this resolution. I wasn't there, but I saw it all. And some of the arguments that were raised, not necessarily by the leadership, the top leadership of the AIA, but by people who just happened to be there and who opposed us, and just stating things that were not factually accurate. Somebody saying that the diesel fires caused the collapse. That's been debunked by NIST. One person just going up and essentially saying, I was there on 9/11, can we put it behind us? Just an emotional plea that has nothing to do with science, and it just baffles me that you're hearing professionals basically use this as their basis for not supporting what would be really just a new investigation, looking at something that is still mired in controversy for a number of architects and engineers and the general public as well. Why not just look into it or support a new investigation? Because NIST got things wrong. I mean, in their analysis, they omitted key structural features. They won't release their input data for public scrutiny. There's a lot of problems here, so why not just look at it again? And these arguments against it don't really hold water for me. So we've been, and Ted mentioned this earlier, but we've been at the AIA convention for a number of years, even before we started submitting the resolution. We had an exhibit booth. There's been some changes in that plan for this year, so I'm going to open it up to Ted to tell everybody what's going on that front. So, Ted, can you elaborate?
Yeah. So this year, I've said we've been to the last 8 AIA national conventions. I had a booth there that we paid for, and where we spoke to thousands of architects, hundreds of whom signed our petition. And this year, suddenly, the AIA denied our application for a booth at the convention. And we were surprised when that happened. To be honest, one of the, and this goes to your previous question, one of the comments that was made at the last business meeting in 2016, that business meeting was much shorter in terms of the debate that was had about the resolution. But that's a whole other thing to get into. But one of the comments that was made was somebody said that, the AIA should not accept our blood money anymore and should not allow us to have a booth on the floor. And this is an example of some of the rhetoric that unfortunately we do have to deal with. And we were surprised and disappointed to learn that the AIA essentially took that person's position. The most vitriolic person to speak at the business meeting last year, the AIA went along with what that person was advocating and denied us a booth at this year's convention. And so we responded, and we had a conference call with the general counsel of the AIA to ask why they had done that, and he essentially refused to give us a reason, saying that they didn't have to give us a reason. And so, of course, this is basically limiting the ability of members of the AIA, hundreds of whom have signed our petition, many of whom come to the convention every year and take part at our booth and volunteer to educate their fellow members about the collapse of Building 7 as well as the Twin Towers. This prevents members from having a discussion about this important issue that clearly is of interest to many people in the design community. And of course, as you would expect, many of the AIA members who are associated with Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, we're upset about the AIA denying us a booth, and we are in the process of protesting that decision. We did send the AIA a letter last week that was signed by 40 members of the AIA, asking the AIA to reconsider its decision, and saying that this was basically violated the the long-held principles that the AIA has about facilitating and encouraging open discussion of issues that affect the architecture community. And so we have yet to see if they'll change their position and allow us to have a booth a month from now. And we hope that they will. We hope that they care about the fact that 40 members of the AIA, as well as the 70 that are sponsoring our resolution, and the hundreds that have signed our petition, they're not allowing them to have a voice, and that they're upset about that. So we'll wait and see, and we'll report back on that.
And pardon me if you mentioned this, I didn't catch it. Did the AIA, when you spoke to them, actually give a reason other than we don't want you there? Did they have a specific reason that they said for why they would deny the booth?
Well, Dan and I were on the conference call together with Jay Stevens, the general counsel of the AIA, and he basically just said point blank, I'm not going to give you a reason. We don't have to give you a reason. We can deny a booth to anybody that applies for one. And that's it.
Well, that is very sad. I mean, he can say that, but that's not really a good justification for it, other than they don't want our message being spoken at the convention this year, beyond the business meeting and the resolution, because we got the signatures. To hear things like what you mentioned, I had forgotten about that until you just brought it up. The person who said the comment about blood money, the emotional pleas that I spoke about earlier. I'm so proud of AE 9/11 Truth for not engaging in this kind of vitriol by standing like a tall oak that just kind of remains in the same place for centuries, because our evidence really doesn't change. I mean, I managed to put on a show every week for the last 5 years talking about the same evidence, but it doesn't change. The official story's changed a couple of times and developed, and finally NIST put out the report, but 105 feet of free fall on Building 7 is the fact. It stays there throughout all of these years that they can't explain away. All of the problems that we have cited here with the official story, the molten metal, the iron microspheres, and the dust. These are things that aren't debatable. I mean, they try to debate them, but they haven't really done a good job, and we've kind of debunked some of these arguments that are made to it. But in this case, where they can only respond with these kind of comments, blood money, I mean, there's no basis in that comment. There's nothing that you could even construe, well, maybe he meant this. We don't have blood money. We get donations from supporters, and we stay alive talking about this highly controversial issue. So I'm glad that we haven't engaged in any of that. Go ahead.
And I just would quickly add that, last year the convention happened to be in the Philadelphia area, where a 9/11 family member named Bob McIlvaine, who lost his son Bobby on 9/11, was there with us and actually attended the business meeting to support us, and was standing next to Dan when he delivered the introductory remarks about our resolution. And so this AIA member even had the audacity to make that claim, and he's standing 20 feet away from Bob McIlvaine, who was clearly there supporting our effort. So that just goes to show that there's sort of a willful blindness, about what we're actually saying and who we actually represent and what we're trying to accomplish. And you can basically have the most principled, straightforward, factually driven argument, and somebody will stand there and say that we're taking we're taking blood money. So it's unfortunate, but I think by and large that doesn't represent most members of the AIA, and that's why, as Richard said, 90% of the architects that come to our booth right away see that something is wrong when we tell them that the official story is that fire brought down that 47-story high-rise. And many of them are just stunned, and many of them sign our petition.
Yeah, and that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot about Bob McIlvaine being there last year. So much goes on, and it's just like we end up forgetting more stuff as more things happen. But yeah, that's a very important key fact, that Bob was there, and then you have people making comments like this. And I just remembered as well that one of our guests here today, Dan Barnum, gave one of the best speeches I've ever seen live before. And I even commented to somebody that was asking us questions, interviewing us afterwards, that is like one of the most dramatic moments I've ever experienced. Dan, I'm going to ask you to talk about that in as much detail as you feel comfortable. What was it like up there talking to that audience and giving that speech that you did last year?
Well, I brought in the fact that I had spent a year in Vietnam, and that our involvement, and it was involvement after I left, actually, but our involvement in Vietnam as a country that cost 50-something thousand lives was based on a lie. And to me, that's very emotional. And quite unnecessary. And here we are still involved 15 years later in some wars in the Middle East that are again based on lies. And how long are we going to put up with living lives based on lies? We've got to face the facts, and that it was difficult for me to do that, but it also felt like that was a very important thing to say and a very important angle to bring in, that we are looking at an issue that we've got to look at the truth. And if we don't look at the truth, then we're gonna just keep getting caught more and more in quagmire, and we're gonna keep getting further and further behind. So we've got to face facts. We've got to look at reality. We've got to quit lying to ourselves. And when all of that was over with, it felt very good. It was heartrending, but it felt very good. So I was glad that I'd said it that way, and I had some people come up and say they were very moved by that, and so that felt good too.
Well, I got this theory just about humans in general, that we pursue certain things because we want to do something for mankind, or to essentially be a hero at some point. I don't think people just do certain things because they want money or get rich or any of that. I think it's because they want to imagine that their expertise in a certain field is going to come in and be of some use in some situation. Like, for instance, I heard an engineer describing, this was a student engineer, describing a situation in the future where, there might be like a Hurricane Katrina situation, where you've got to fix some kind of levee or whatever, and he may have to come in someday and lend his expertise, and he wants to have all the knowledge that he can so that he can do this and help people, and there's certainly engineers out there that go travel around the world, third world countries, try to lend their expertise to make people's lives better, and they've decided that this is how they're going to contribute to the human race in this particular field. We all have different ways that we do it. Some people pursue medicine, some people become lawyers, and they want to help people in the legal system, justice system. So that's great, and I think that really is what motivates a lot of people. Sometimes we lose our way, but overall, people are good, and this is what guides them, what fuels them. And so in this situation, this is a chance to do some good. 9/11 is an event that has impacted our life so much that I can't imagine a world in which it didn't actually happen now. I mean, every time you turn on the television, you see the wounded warriors, you see widows of soldiers that died in the wars, you see people in other countries that were affected by the foreign policy that was adopted after 9/11. I mean, you can have your opinions about whether or not those were necessary, but if there's any questions at all about September 11th, they should be addressed, even if you don't want to believe that there's anything more to it or anything to the controlled demolition evidence. The fact that so many people have these very reasonable questions means that we've got an issue here that can't just be overlooked, and that causes more disruption of the public psyche, that causes more insecurity within our country when we ignore problems like this. So for the greater good of America and for national security, I believe it's the duty of anybody with the knowledge and with the credentials to their name to actually become informed, not just to opine without having knowledge and information, but to actually become informed and contribute an opinion one way or another on it. But once you see all the facts, and you can't do that unless you actually take a position where you want to look into it again, where you actually, for instance, read the Beyond Misinformation booklet, read the official reports put out by NIST, watch videos, your own videos, do your own independent research, and contribute to the call for a new investigation. I can't stress that enough. We're simply asking the AIA and, by extension, the rest of the world too, to address these very reasonable questions. That's what we do in science, and that's what we do when we have a disaster like 9/11. I think that people can be those heroes they imagined being when they pursued their professions by doing this. So I'm going to ask Richard, what's new this year? Anything different about this year's resolution than previous years?
Well, we've included the specific points of evidence that are, as has been mentioned here, irrefutable. And I think this is one of the reasons why people are reviewing this right now, since it's been submitted, and even last year. And it's become enough of a controversy that we've been asked to go to Mobile, Alabama, for instance, and present our courses on the Building 7, which is now approved by the AIA for one learning unit for health, safety, and welfare, which is something that architects need 18 units per year in order to maintain their membership in the AIA. So they heard about the controversy, and they saw us at the conventions where we were promoting support for our resolution and a new investigation. And we've been asked to go to Mobile, Alabama. We gave a 1-hour course. We had 40 of the local architects come, and the majority of them agree we need a new investigation. So that's very telling. They all got the credit. We went to Boston and presented to a similar number of architects. Maybe it was 30. And once again, an overwhelming majority of the hands go up when asked, do we need a new investigation? All these hands go up. And in addition, we got more supporters for our co-sponsors for our resolution for this year. And now we've been asked to come to one of the premier high-rise architecture firms in Los Angeles to give the presentation at noon in their office to the group. And we're very excited to do that just the week before coming to Orlando to present the resolution and begin the debate with our opening statements. So that's what I'm particularly excited about. The word is getting out. We will come to major architecture firms and chapters and present the evidence. We can do it virtually also now from our headquarters in Berkeley. Anywhere in the world, certainly, but specifically the AIA firms in America. We have an on-demand series of courses, which are very exciting, not only Building 7 for that hour, but an hour on World Trade Center explosive destruction, and then a whole separate hour on the Twin Towers, focusing on the incendiary evidence, extreme heat. So these are all courses which architects can get credits for just on demand from their own computer, and then they take a short quiz. And that's really exciting for us because now we're going to be launching an educational awareness to 25,000 architects and letting them know that all about our courses, so we can further get the word out through by means of education.
That is a huge step forward. Ted, as we've seen more acceptance of our position, more interest in the evidence that we show to people. How has our outreach evolved? And Richard's kind of alluded to it already in his answer just a moment ago. But if you can elaborate on that, or what are some of the things that we've done a little bit differently in the last couple of years as we've been getting more support?
Sure. Well, I think one of the initiatives that has been bearing fruit is the fact that we have been doing, systematically emailing architects and engineers throughout the country, on a weekly, monthly basis, sending them Beyond Misinformation, which we published back in 2015, and sending them links to our videos. And we saw that at the convention last year in 2016. We had architects come up to us who said, I received Beyond Misinformation. I read it. I think, you guys are completely right on. Right there, they signed our petition. And so, as Dan said, we're basically chipping away. We have, in the last year, starting with Beyond Misinformation a year and a half ago, and since then, we have been doing, when the time is right, doing large mailings to large groups of architects or engineers or what have you. And, we recently, in December, did a mailing to 25,000 AIA members, introducing them to this resolution that we just submitted, that was just accepted, that will be discussed next month. And we had in that mailer, we had a business reply card that architects that received it could put that in mail for free and become sponsors of the resolution. And we had 40 AIA members sponsor the resolution because they got our mailer. It seems like a small percentage, of course, out of 25,000, but I think it takes a lot of courage and determination to kind of have the guts to basically put your name on a piece of paper and send it in to an organization that you don't know all that well, to say, yes, I support a new investigation into the collapse of Building 7. I want my name out there in front of all of my fellow architects. So, I applaud all of those people for standing up and for responding to our mailer and becoming a part of this effort. And we've done other mailers like that as well. And we have one that's going to be happening right now. We just started fundraising for it on Tuesday, March 28th. This one, like last year, is going to go to about 2,500 AIA members who are on the boards of their local AIA chapters, or who are the presidents of their state organizations, or to, essentially a handful of architects who are on the national leadership bodies of the AIA. And that's one of the reasons we believe that, we had a jump last year in terms of the number of votes in favor of the resolution. And so we're going to follow up with that. It's basically a revised version of what we sent out in December. And this is a really important part of, raising awareness, is repetition. Just like in advertising, you really start to pay attention to an ad once you've seen it, 5 or 10 times. And so we need to just keep on going, repetition, keep chipping away, and getting people familiar with this message, getting them familiar with the evidence. And I think that, this mailing, which is going to be very cost effective, is going to bear some real results for us at the convention next month. So those are the kinds of things we're doing. We also, we're going to go to the convention, by the way, even though we don't have a booth. Like, we're going to go be on the expo floor, talking to architects, telling them about the resolution, telling them about all the courses that Richard just described, because we're basically giving these thousands of architects the opportunity to learn about this tremendously important event that is highly related to their area of expertise, their profession, and earn learning units in the process, which they need in order to maintain their AIA membership and their licenses. So we will be going to the convention regardless of whether or not we are given a booth.
Now, Ted, I'm going to keep you on the hook here for a moment, because we've got a lot of great supporters who have been with us for years, people who know the evidence inside and out, have been with us through the good times and the bad. How can they help us out?
Yeah, so, well, the first way to help is to donate to this particular campaign. We're trying to raise $10,000 this week in order to fund our trip to the convention. and to pay for this mailing to the 2,500 architects, and that covers everything. The printing of the brochures. It's actually an 8-page brochure that has all the resolution language in it, all these beautiful images that help illustrate the evidence. And so by donating any amount that is manageable, we're not asking people to break the bank for this, but if people can donate $20, then we will send you guys a souvenir copy of the mailer itself, of the brochure, which is, I think very, very finely designed and produced, and just a souvenir of, this important initiative. And people can also help by, you will find a PDF of our brochure about the resolution with all the evidence in it. You can email that to anybody that you know, especially if it's an architect or an engineer. All the evidence is concisely summarized in that resolution. So the resolution itself is a very effective outreach tool. And then I always say, share the 15-minute video with Ed Asner just about Building 7. It's a very good entry point into all the evidence surrounding the collapse of the World Trade Center buildings. And then also 2 weeks ago, we just released a 30-minute interview with a person named Peter Ketchum, who is a former employee of this agency we've been talking about, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which did the investigation into the collapse of all 3 buildings. And he has basically come out in the last 6 months challenging the reports that his agency put out. He's a former employee. He left NIST in 2011 after working there for 14 years. So he was an employee of NIST the entire time that they were working on the investigation. He didn't participate in the investigation and really didn't follow it much. He just knew that it was happening. And then when he started looking into the evidence last summer for the first time, looking at DVDs and materials that AE 9/11 Truth had produced, as well as other researchers and engineers and scientists out there, it became obvious to him very quickly that there was overwhelming evidence that all 3 buildings were brought down by controlled demolition, and that his own agency had consciously, deliberately suppressed that truth. And so he is now speaking out, and we are very honored to be working with him. And so look for that 30-minute interview. It's called Stand for the Truth. A government researcher speaks out, and share that. We found it so far to be very effective with people who are new to the evidence, because we're basically asking them to go through the same learning process that Peter Ketchum went through, who for 15 years didn't look at this evidence, even though it was kind of right in front of him. But he has kind of the courage and the humility to look at it now for the first time and realize the truth, and then to courageously speak out about it. So it's a really good piece to share with people.
In our last 3 minutes here, we're going to go to Dan and then Richard. Dan, really quickly, what can architects do to help us out?
Well, the first thing they can do is wake up and ask their organization, the AIA, to wake up and to go ahead and do what we're asking them to do and support us, and to go along with supporting a new investigation. That's critical. That's a big thing, and I think if we can get that done, we will have gone a long, long way in getting done what we've sought to do for many, many years.
All right, Richard, in our last minute or so here, I'm going to leave you with the final thought as we go a month away from Orlando and the AIA convention. What do you say to architects and supporters about the importance of this resolution and supporting it?
The architects have to step beyond their fear, is really what it is, because this information challenges our worldview, and so we're more likely, as Dan implied, to dismiss it rather than look squarely at it. The evidence is absolutely undeniable, but our challenge is getting architects to actually look at it. And when you put it in their face at the conventions with the video, they are faced with an internal problem. Am I willing to go past my current worldview and take in information which might challenge my faith in the American Institute of Architects as an institution, challenged my faith perhaps in my government. There are deeper implications here, and that's kind of what we're up against and we have to back off somehow from that, a deeper challenge, and to say, okay, all right, true, but is the evidence true or is it not? And 99% of architects look at it, and if they actually have the opportunity to ask and answer that question themselves, they come to the reality that it is true, and then, of course, they have to do something about it. Our conscience forces us into dealing with that perception. That's why we have a 1-minute video showing Building 7 coming down in the exact manner of a classic controlled demolition. We ask them, do you think fires brought this building down? They say, no, sign here. That's what we need to do. Regarding our supporters who are already aware of this information, it's absolutely critical that they send us to Orlando by responding to the invitation that all of them should have in email and on Facebook so that we can go and so we can present this information to the 400 business leaders of architects representing the 80,000 architects who are now voting on April 26th on this resolution, calling upon the AIA to call for a new investigation. And we can't do it without our supporters sending us to the convention. And as Ted mentioned, that along with the marketing efforts associated with it, with the printed mailed publications, that's a $10,000 effort. So please support us.
And those are the words to end it on. I have no doubt we're going to make an impact this year, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to be able to get the word out to all the people that need to hear it there in Orlando. Richard, Ted, Dan, thank you so much for coming on 9/11 Free Fall and all that you guys do here, both publicly and behind the scenes, to get this message out. It's an honor to be working with you guys, and we're going to do a great job this year, no doubt.
Thanks so much, Andy, for having us.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
This program is on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also keep track of the archives by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.